sportscourier.com, post-fight Bellator 74, with the chairman, Bjorn Rebney. Been quite a while, Bjorn. What did you think of tonight's action kicking off Season 7?
I thought tonight's action was great. I thought it answered a lot of questions about a lot of people were asking, going back and forth, where's Doug Lima and where's, Paul Semtex Daly and where's Amasu and where's all these other guys in our welterweight division. These guys stepped up and answered those questions. The real Marius Sarumskas that I wanted to see for years stepped up and elevated his game. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that Nordin Taleb was one of the top guys in this whole tournament. I mean, he trains out of TriStar. He's a monster. And Marius Sarumskas walked through it, hurt him, I think, substantially 3 times. In the fight, looked like the old Marius Sarumskas that I loved watching in Japan for so many years. I thought he looked great. Koreshkov looked great. Sarev looked really good. And, of course, Lyman Good, in what was probably the toughest draw in the tournament, looked great against Judo Jim Wallhead. So I thought it was a great show. I mean, I'm amped right now just because I got a chance to watch it, and I was sitting cage side. There wasn't a bad fight in the group, and you got to see great submission stuff. You got to see great stand-up. I thought it was a heck of a show.
And one of my colleagues interviewed Jimmy Smith, and he said the one thing he's looking for this season is hunger. Did you see that tonight in the cage?
I saw it. I saw it in Koreshkov. Koreshkov had to dig down, had to really dig down to win his fight, and I don't think he's ever had to do that before. He's always finished his fights before the end of the third, and tonight he was pushed the entirety of that fight. So, I mean, I think you saw it. I think you saw it out of Zarev in a very tough fight. I think you saw it out of Zarumskas in the Nordin fight, because Nordin just kept coming, was throwing head kicks, which I don't think Marius expected. I thought you saw a lot of hunger. I thought you saw hunger in Lyman Good versus Jim Wallhead, just in terms of a guy who wanted to get back and reestablish himself. So I liked what I saw. I thought I saw a great show, and I thought I saw some guys who have got a lot of gas in the tank, guys who could make some real rumblings in our 70 division.
And do you think Lyman took it as a slight that last time he was on the prelim card, and that's why he just demolished his opponent in 14 seconds? And then now with the performance that he had, I mean, he's looked like a totally different fighter.
Yeah, he has. But, I mean, Lyman had some issues that he wanted to deal with in his own way and stepped away for almost a year and a half. And, knock on wood, it looks like he dealt with them pretty efficiently because he looks awesome. So, we haven't seen him on the ground yet. Which were always some of the questions that existed around Lyman. Nobody ever questioned his ability standing up. Nobody ever questioned his power, his striking. But, we'll get those questions answered, I'm sure, sooner rather than later. But, I mean, he looked great tonight. And Judo Jim Wallhead's a very he just beat Trigg, and, of course, Trigg may not be in the height of his career. But the knockout over Joey Villasenor, that was a spectacular knockout. Jim's looked really good, and Lyman looked dominant. So, good for him.
Man, I was checking my phone and checking my Tweetcaster app, and I saw just a couple weeks ago, Thiago Santos said that he was weighing at 294.
Right.
What's his progress now with the weight? Because I know he's had the trouble. He's got the big fight coming up with Eric Prindle, probably the most cursed matchup in Bellator history. Hopefully we could finally get that rematch.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on his progress?
Well, from a good news perspective, you do have to realize that 3.5 weeks out from a fight, a heavyweight being at 294 is not out of this world. That's not an unusual position. 20 to 30 pounds out 3 weeks out is not like, if I had a 155-pounder who 3 weeks out was 30 pounds over, I would think the world was coming to an end. He is at a better weight now than he was for either of the 2 attempts to make weight against Prindle. He's training down with Laborio at ATT. He's got amazing coaches around him. At last I'd heard, he was down about 80, 86, between 80 and 86, fluctuating before and after workouts. And an 18 to 20 pound cut for a heavyweight, coming into a show last week is pretty customary. So, knock on wood, I would never want to bet the house on it because he's had obviously pretty prolific issues. But my hope against hope is that he'll be fine. He's training with great people. He's training with one of the better coaches in all of mixed martial arts. So my fingers are crossed, and hopefully the curse will be broken.
Now, I personally think he's a stud, but do you think he realizes the ramifications of this fight?
Well, he is very, very in love with his wife. He's got an incredible family that he's got down in Brazil. He has a home life down there that he is very attached to, and he's a very young guy. He divorced himself from all of that, left all of that, came to the States, relocated to Florida, doesn't speak English, in an attempt to show and to really establish how much he is vested in doing this the right way. So, you take a young kid like that from not the kind of metropolitan center of big cities in Brazil, and you move him out of that family environment, and you live in a dorm, in a gym with folks who don't speak Portuguese as a first language. That's a pretty good step to say, hey, I'm taking this deadly seriously, and I want to take it to the next level. His submission game's crazy. I mean, he's a black belt of black belts. Like, he's a very, very legitimate guy on the ground, and his punching power is spectacular for a heavyweight. So if he can pull it all together, we've got a really good heavyweight on our hands.
Now, one really good heavyweight that's been missing has actually been in the Impact Wrestling front. Your friend Chris Park, Abyss.
Yeah.
What are his whereabouts right now?
That is a question that I don't have an answer to. Spectacular talent, and I don't have the first clue as to where he is. I thought that was a question you were actually going to ask earlier. It's a question that I still don't have an answer for.
And as fans saw on TNA Impact Wrestling, Sting, Hulk Hogan got kidnapped, and Joseph Park, Abyss's brother. Do you think now with the big revelation that Joseph Park knows something and he's kind of in the crosshairs of Aces and Eights that maybe, perhaps, Abyss will come back to rescue his brother?
Yeah, well, first of all, the hammer came as quite a shock to me, as it did to everybody. And second of all, you'd have to assume that if anybody would know, if anybody could kind of put that map into play and be able to follow it, that would be the guy. Remains to be seen. I'll be tuning in next week. Next week, King Mo Lawal, Impact Wrestling. And who called him out? Hulk Hogan, of all people. I mean, that's pretty cool. So I'm excited to watch Impact next week.
Now, I didn't get a chance to catch all of Impact. I was a little busy doing my MMA thing. However, I saw on Instagram.
Let me down, brother. Let me down.
Sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm slacking. I'm slacking.
Of all the people who I think would not miss Impact on a weekly basis, sitting right next to me.
Blaming on my boss's fault behind the camera. And I saw on Instagram, King Mo was tweeting.
Yeah.
Going to be the special referee for Bobby Roode versus James Storm at Bound for Glory.
Who else could keep the two of them apart? Who else from a strength dominance position? Who else would you want in that cage, in that ring, in that kind of an environment? I mean, from an enforcer perspective, do they get better than King Mo, one of the best light heavyweights in all of MMA?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, brother. I think he's the perfect guy for the job.
And I know you're not going to give a prediction because you never do. And ironically, I interviewed you last year right before Bound for Glory.
Right.
Let me just ask you your thoughts on Austin Aries defending the TNA World title against Jeff Hardy.
Boy, I have been a Jeff Hardy fan for a long time. The athleticism that it's like watching Cirque du Soleil, literally inside of a ring. I wouldn't want to make a prediction because you don't know what's going to happen any more than I know what's going to happen when the fights take place in the Bellator cage. But it's going to be exciting to watch, I can tell you that.
Do you know how he does that face paint with the eyes? I always wanted to do that, but I just don't know how.
I wouldn't even begin to know how that works, but it looks awesome. But I wouldn't even begin to know how that works.
Now, I was back on the MMA front. I was actually talking earlier to Alexander Shlemenko's manager, Alexei, asking about Shlemenko's progress and everything, when that vacant title fight's going to be with Miguel Facao. Told me Alex was a little disappointed. Title fight kept getting pushed back. Expects it to be in early January. Would you say that's about right?
Yeah, that is about right. I mean, we've got Alexander Shlemenko's looks spectacular. Shlemenko just had a fight in Russia. I just spoke with Marcelo Brigadero, who trains Michael Falcao. He's training at an elite level. He looks spectacular. He's got six-pack abs. His head is completely right and into the game. That's going to be an amazing fight, but it's going to be a fight we see on Spike.
So are all the title fights going to end up being on Spike, or are we going to get at least one title fight, perhaps maybe the interim title fight with Strauss and Pitbull?
I don't think we're going to leapfrog because I just got done speaking with Pat. Pat's fractured orbital is coming around really well, so he's going to probably be able to get into training. I think from a progression standpoint, that Pitbull Curran fight should happen first. 35 could conceptually happen this season, and 205 could conceptually happen this season. We're waiting to see, but we could see those at the tail end of this MTV2 run.
Now, you had a little bit of a spat with Dana White, almost like a friendly spat. It was like Dana didn't personally insult you, but he also insulted your business, which is your livelihood and everything. You've managed to stay very cool, calm, collected. Is there ever going to be a chance to see you just blow a gasket? Because you always just seem so cool and calm, even in the moments where I think you're just going to flip. For example, post-fight, Curran-Warren, where that ref should have stopped the fight 30 seconds earlier, and you were just cool as a cucumber, where I probably would have just cussed everybody in sight.
Well, I mean, I think if you were ever going to see me blow a gasket, it would be in an issue like Curran-Warren. I mean, that was the first time that I've ever sat cage side where I threw my headset off and started yelling at a referee, which is inappropriate and not my place. But, you know, at every level in athletics or in performance, you'll see guys freeze occasionally. I think the Curran-Warren situation was an example where a referee just froze. Everybody that was watching that fight wanted it stopped. That's the place where you'll see me blow a gasket, when the health and safety of a guy that I care about who fights in this organization is potentially being jeopardized. The other part of it is just business. It's just business. He has a business to run. I have a business to run. there are spectacular magical transitions happening in our business. We're moving to Spike, the group responsible for really building the UFC into what it is now. We're owned in a large part by Viacom, a huge media empire that's got tremendous opportunity to brand and market and promote this brand, and they're heavily vested in doing so. So I'm not surprised. I'm not heavily angered. It's just part of the business that we're in. It's part of the machinations that occur in the fight game some of the time. But my hyper focus is on what we do. My hyper focus is on the production of events like tonight, and getting to having the privilege of sitting cage side and watching guys like we watched tonight, Zarumskas and Koreshkov and Zarev and Lyman Good do what they did, and some incredible undercard fights. So it's not difficult for me to stay calm in those situations, because I've had difficult situations, and this is not one of them. I've faced certain tough spots in my life and existence, and given the partners that I have right now with Spike and Viacom and the people that I get the pleasure of working with, things like that don't really light my fire. They don't bother me. It's part of business. You just kind of roll with the punches.
Well, your lack of social media activity has kind of bothered me a little bit. Although I'll get chatty on this. I did see one tweet at Bjorn Rebney, of course. You rolled with Ben Askren.
Yeah.
Why would you roll with a 2008 Olympian in wrestling and your current welterweight champion?
I was rolling with Marcelo Brigadero, doing some luto libre, and Ben Askren walked by, and I for just a moment in time slipped up and was a little bit of a smartass, and I yelled out to Ben, who was walking by in flip-flops and khaki shorts and a collared shirt. I go, "Hey, do you want to roll?" And he literally just threw off the collared shirt and flipped off the flip-flops and plopped down on the mat and went, "Yeah, let's go." And I was like, "Don't you even want to warm up?" And he goes, "No, not really necessary, brother." And we just started to roll. I didn't really intend for it to happen. I was almost just kind of being a jokester, and he just jumped right into it. And it was just, you have any brothers?
I do not have any brothers.
Okay, well, if you have brothers or kind of older siblings, and you've ever been in a pool when you're a kid and you're the youngest kid, and they push your head into the water and they just hold you down there, and there's nothing you can do, you're just fighting desperately for air, and they're just kind of laughing at you. That was what the whole experience was very much like. It was just, there was nothing I could do, no matter what I tried. And every time I thought I had something, it was immediately taken away from me. And he was just being as cool as he could be, going probably 10%, if maybe 5% of his ability.
So kind of like an old school Hulk Hogan squash match.
Yeah, like I think it was probably even a little bit worse than that, because there was no give and take. But it was cool. I mean, he's an Olympian and arguably one of the best fighters on the ground that we have in mixed martial arts, and he showed me the courtesy of not tearing my head off and rolling with me for probably 20-25 minutes. I was completely exhausted and a little bit demoralized, but stoked by the fact that I got to do it. So.
Well, Bjorn, thank you so much for the time, as always. I do expect more tweets my way.
You got it. I will be tweeting more. I've been a little bit underwater in terms of getting ready for the show, but I'll get right back on it.
Sounds good.
All right.